Okay, we're going to get started with our first afternoon speaker. Jim Gerber is the Senior Vice President of TrialPay, and he's going to talk today about branded campaigns and how brands are going to be playing a larger role in all of our daily lives. Jim?
Great. This is on? We're good. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much. Again, my name is Jim Gerber. I manage our partnerships and business development at TrialPay. And what I'm going to be talking about today is how brands are playing an increasing role in social games and sort of how their presence in social games has been evolving. I'll talk about two things. One, I'd like to start with a handful of statistics about advertising online, advertising in social games, overall monetization in social games, and then we'll go into some actual examples of the way brands are actually surfacing in the games. Just to get a sense of the audience, I'm not going to talk a lot about TrialPay, but how many people here are familiar with TrialPay by show of hands? A little less than half. Okay, great. So just a couple quick facts about us. We are a transactional advertising company. What that means in the context of how we work in social games is generally we provide an offer wall so that your users who may not be willing to spend money to progress in the game can progress by taking advantage of an offer from one of our advertisers. We have, our reach is about 200 million consumers today that have interacted with TrialPay. We work with over 10,000 merchants and over 2,000 advertisers. The platform is available in about 12 languages, and we have a number of top-tier investors, about 120 people in the company, most of which are based in California, some in India, and some in Russia. We power the virtual or the earned economy on Facebook. So what that means is any game developer that's running on Facebook that wants to provide this type of interaction between an advertiser and a consumer to interact and then earn currencies or credits does so through the TrialPay platform. We work with other platforms as well, and as you see up there, we work with most of the main game companies that run on Facebook. That's it about TrialPay. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions afterward, but I really want to talk to you more about advertising and brand advertising. So the good news is that online advertising continues to grow. It's growing both in absolute dollar value and in terms of the percentage of ad dollars spent across various forms of media. As you see from the statistic on the bottom of the screen, it's grown from about 15% back in 2009 of total media spend up to what is expected to be 20% by 2014. And that doesn't tell the whole story because currently users or individuals, consumers, are spending roughly 26% of their time spent across media online. So the dollars spent on online advertising are not commensurate with the amount of time spent there, so that will only continue to grow as well. Looking at the social gaming market overall, we see that in 2011 it grew about 35% over 2010, from $3.6 billion to $4.9 billion. That's projected to nearly double again by 2014 to $8.6 billion. This includes revenue from virtual goods, from advertising, and from offers. Now let's look at social games versus other media. As you see here, social games have actually eclipsed primetime TV in terms of popularity. It's not all TV, but primetime, which is still, I think, a pretty significant statistic. So you see there, this goes back to last fall, September 25th. Cityville and Sim Social were the top two media properties above 2.5 Men. And then you see a handful of others, Adventure World, Farmville, and 21 Questions ahead of the rest of the top TV shows that were showing at prime time during that week. And that was a sweeps week for those who are not familiar with sweeps. I don't know if it's an American phenomenon or not, but it's the week where TV networks try to juice up their numbers because that's how they get paid out by advertisers. So this is like the highest viewing week generally of the year for prime time. You see some of the rest of the numbers there. In terms of demographics, as game developers, you guys have amassed a very attractive group of consumers for advertisers. As you see here, over half are female, generally playing social games, and over 3/4 are between the ages of 18 and 54. Both of these are very, very attractive demographics for advertisers. When you take the intersection of those, or a subset of that, you get the highly desirable soccer moms. So advertisers are paying, obviously, tremendous money to go after those soccer moms, and it's having an effect on other media. So in addition to seeing how it's playing in prime time, you see this headline from Adweek, which is maybe a little bit of hyperbole. Soaps have been in a bit of decline for about the past decade, but certainly social games are accelerating that trend, as evidenced by the fact that 2 of the most prominent soap operas in the US were canceled in 2011. I think All My Children had been on the air for 41 years consecutively, and a show called One Life to Live had been on the show for 43 years. Both of these have been taken off the air. A couple quick numbers about social gaming and about Facebook. Some of this is a little bit more visible now since Facebook filed their S1 to go public. As of the end of last year, there were 845 million users on Facebook, and they're playing social games roughly 40% of their time on the site. When looking at both Facebook and non-Facebook, there are roughly 300 million users playing social games on a monthly basis. Apologies a little bit for the eye chart here. I'll just call out a couple of the key statistics here. Advertisers are certainly aware of this and taking note. So the graph in the upper left-hand corner or table basically talks about the US social gaming revenue split by segment. So you can see in 2011, a little over $1 billion spent in social gaming across advertising, offers, and virtual goods, and you can see the breakdown there. The pie charts on the bottom show those same numbers broken down as a percentage. What we see is that advertising has grown from last year, or 2010, at 14% of overall social gaming revenue. It's growing by this year is expected to be 20%, so a 6% increase. Virtual goods have been largely flat, or will be flat during that time frame. And offers, while growing on a absolute dollar basis, are growing at a slightly slower rate, so their percentage has shrunk a bit. Looking at the table on the top right, what you see is that over a 2-year period, advertising and social games on a worldwide basis, not just US, has grown by about 60%. Faster rate internationally, or I should say non-US, since we're not in the US right now, at 160%, and within the US market at 33%. So a handful of stats there. Now let's talk about what brands are doing online, which brands, and the different kinds of things they're doing with social games. So a number of prominent brands that you see here have been moving on to Facebook and other social platforms. There have been a number of high-profile campaigns, I'm sure many of which you guys will recognize. This first one is not in a social game, but I think it's interesting and worth noting for a couple reasons. Ford, when they were introducing the new Focus, wanted to go after a younger demographic. The brand is generally perceived as fairly stodgy, and so by going to Facebook, they were able to target more effectively a younger demographic using this cutesy little character, this orange guy named Doug. They were able to generate a lot of virality. As you see by the numbers up there, 43,000 likes. That's the good news. The bad news is that they didn't spend a lot of money on this campaign. So while brands like Facebook and they like the virality, they're not spending as much money on the core Facebook, and it's, I think, a combination of things. One is they like the value you can get from virality. Obviously, if people are recommending it, that's costing them less money. That's to their benefit. Secondly, I think they're a little bit cautious, and appropriately so, of the the lack of virality that you may get when you're perceived as sort of buying those likes or buying those viralities. The good news for you guys is that in the context of social games, brands are willing to spend money, and so let's look at a few examples there. So there's been a bit of an evolution. So brands have been spending, or I should say advertisers have been spending money in social games for a while. Traditionally a little bit more on the direct response side. So there are two examples up here. The one on the left is a game targeted at young women, fashion designer. There's an icon. This happens to have an icon in the game that we call our deal spot. When the user clicks on that, they get an offer to subscribe to People magazine and then earn in-game currency. Sort of the way most advertisers have been taking advantage of social games. What we've been seeing more and more over the last year or so has been pure brand engagements, where it's just awareness. In this case, it's a fairly simple video. The game is SimSocial, and by clicking on the banner at the bottom, user sees an ad for a BlackBerry playbook, which, contrary to popular belief, actually still exists, and then earns, again, some virtual currency. There's some good reasons for why this is happening, right? The user has basically a few main ways to progress in a game. They can click and take time and wait the day for things to happen, click some more, maybe spam their friends. They can spend real money. Obviously, that's what we want to see users doing, what you guys as developers want to see, but we know that's still a fairly small percentage, single-digit percentages in most cases. Or they can engage with an advertiser. The increase of these pure brand engagements is clear and I think understandable because it creates a very low hurdle way. While it's nice to get a user to subscribe to a magazine, subscribe to a movie club like a Netflix, if they can watch a video, they can do that much more easily, lower hurdle decision, and they can do it more frequently. So that's part of the reason we're seeing more of these types of ads. So there's two key aspects to the value of advertising, brand advertising in social games. The first one is that the user chooses to engage with the advertiser. This is key because even though the ad is an incentivized ad, studies have shown that users have a more positive predisposition to an ad that they choose to engage with than one that's forced upon them, whether it's an interstitial, a pre-roll, or otherwise. And they're willing to engage at a deeper level. So the second point is they're willing to either watch a longer video, watch a video that might include some sort of question and answer at the end, some sort of survey, some sort of application to find a store, or do something else that the advertiser wants them to do because there is this value exchange involved. So those two things are very key to advertisers. And this process in the social game actually creates this virtuous cycle, right? So the user chooses to watch a video, so the advertiser gets not only a viewer, but someone who's engaged and willing to watch that video, in many cases longer than the other kinds of video that they're going to be able to get online. If they go to YouTube, the pre-roll, if it's more than 15 seconds, people are generally not watching it. But here they will engage for longer. So the advertiser gets an engaged viewer, the player gets the currency that they want, and then the player goes and spends that currency in your games and gets a deeper level of engagement with the game, gets further in the game, gets to the next level, and is spending more time in your game. Everyone wins, advertiser, player, and developer. So now let's look at a handful of different ways that brands have gotten engaged in games. This is Gagaville. Is everyone familiar with this engagement? No. Okay, so Farmville did a special version of Farmville where they worked with Lady Gaga. They did a special branded version of Farmville called Gagaville, which was fairly well advertised. And resulted, as you see here, in a spike of 30% in daily visits to the game. Very beneficial both, in this case, to the brand, which is Lady Gaga, and of course of the game itself, benefiting both Ms. Gaga and Mr. Pincus. So that's at one end of the spectrum, right? That's a custom game essentially developed around a brand. At the other end of the spectrum, the more simple version is a straight video. It could be 15 seconds, it could be 30 seconds. So what you see here, this is actually one example, 2 pictures of it. The game is Sim Social. The user, by clicking on the icon, gets the offer that you see in the pop-up on the left. It basically says, watch this video and here's what you'll earn. By clicking on the Watch Now button, they get the video in an overlay. They watch the video, they earn their currency. As the overlay disappears, the user is automatically back in the game. So fairly simple. It ties to the narrative of the story in this case. We certainly recommend that. So Sims need energy, they need food. Great to have an advertiser that's relevant to the actual game. So that's at the other end of the spectrum, a fairly simple engagement. Some things that sort of fall in between those, a couple of examples. Top left is a game called It Girl from CrowdStar. It's targeted at young women. They earn points by being cool, having friends, and going shopping. Being the father of a 13-year-old girl, I can validate that going shopping actually does make you cooler. And so Old Navy bought a sponsorship in this game so that the actual avatars were shopping in an Old Navy store. The example in the bottom right is, again, Zynga example. It's Farmville. And what they did was they did a sponsorship with this company called Farmers Insurance. I don't know if they're international. They're an American insurer. And they frequently will advertise on the side of a blimp over sporting events, Super Bowl, baseball games, other football games, etc. So the farmer's blimp circles around lots of places. People are familiar with that. So what they did was they had the blimp in the game, but it wasn't just an awareness campaign. If the user interacted with the blimp, then they would actually get crop insurance that allowed their crops to stay alive longer so they would not go fallow in the same amount of time as if they had not interacted with the advertiser. So again, a little bit deeper integration, a little bit more involved, gets the user involved, creates a positive association, not just from the advertisement itself, but from the interaction that the user has with that brand in the game. A couple of other quick examples. I like these because, again, they're keeping the advertisement very much in the narrative of the game, in the story itself. So top example there is Car Town, and there's a combination of collecting cars and racing cars in the game. In car racing, obviously there's lots of sponsorships. Cars are plastered, drivers are plastered with sponsorships. Sprint is a common sponsor in NASCAR races, and they're a big sponsor in the game as well, so very consistent with the story. Lower right, NG Moko's game about city building. Can't build a city without real estate agents, so they've got Century 21 that's as the real estate firm in the game. So this last example, I find the most interesting actually of all. And it's a little bit different than some of the others in a couple regards. First, actually, before that, it's a little different for Netflix. Netflix has traditionally been a really big direct response advertiser. Their brand is very well known. They're all about who can I get to sign up and what am I willing to pay for that user based on how long I expect that user to be a member. In this case, they were moving into a new market. So they were moving into Latin America. Actually, this is the English language version because they're moving now into England and Ireland. But when we started working with them last year when they were moving down into Latin America, and they realized their brand was not recognized, people did not know what they did not know how Netflix worked, so they needed to essentially educate consumers as to what they did and the benefits. So we created this engagement with them. We call it the Netflix Hub. There are 5 different activities that the user can interact with. The user had to interact with 3 of these activities to earn their currency. So again, a brand engagement, no need to do anything other than to interact with the ad itself. So they click on any of the 3, then they click on 2 others, and they earn their, in this case, 9 Facebook credits. One of the examples of the types of activities that the user would do, you see here they drag and drop the things that are important to them in watching movies or TV shows. And once they do that, of course, Netflix shows the value proposition of how they do that particular thing. Actually, all 4 things, but the thing that was most important to the user, they describe how they do that really well and in a way that benefits the user. User completes the 3 activities, and then they earn their currency. Very simple, straightforward brand engagement. User doesn't have to do anything, provide any personal information, buy anything. However, now that the engagement, actually the education part is over, they've got a second offer. So this is a combination of brand engagement and direct response. So if the user has earned their 9 credits, likes what they've learned about Netflix and wants to subscribe, they subscribe and they can earn additional credits. This snapshot I took before, this is going live in the UK in about a week or 2. So that's why the amount there is a blank, but it's a much larger number than the 9 credits. I don't think the price had been set when I took this snapshot. I really like this engagement. All of the others we've seen so far are sort of, for the most part, one or the other. It's sort of just brand awareness or some sort of action. I like the fact that this involves both components. It reminds me of a Chinese character often associated with weddings. Does anyone recognize what this character is? Know the name of it? No? It's called Double Happiness. So I think it's apropos for the advertiser to get both the brand awareness and in some cases the direct response. So as you're thinking about different kinds of engagements, both brand and in fact direct response, and what kind of revenue can you expect to earn from these different types of advertising, I think you can look at them across this sort of matrix, where increased engagement generally will drive increased value to you, the developer, and an increased price that the advertiser is willing to pay. Sort of the sort of lower left item, CPV or cost per view, that's generally associated with a simple video ad, could be anywhere from a 15, 30-second or longer ad. Generally, the longer the ad, the more the advertiser is willing to pay. The more you should insist that the advertiser pays because you want to make sure that you give value to your players and don't alienate them by giving them something they're not expecting. CPL, cost per lead, generally will get you higher payouts. The user's generally being asked to give up some sort of information, email, phone number, et cetera, to get a price quote for something, insurance or otherwise. So that's higher level of engagement, higher payout. CPS or cost per sale, this could be someone buying clothing at auto.de, at Amazon, flowers at Teleflora, et cetera. Generally, again, higher payout. The payouts for times like now during pre-Valentine's Day tend to go up quite dramatically as well. And lastly, CPA, cost per acquisition, differing from cost per sale generally in that it's more of an ongoing relationship. It could be a subscription to a service like a Netflix or other sort of movie or music type of product or service. It could be a credit card where there's going to be an ongoing relationship. Those tend to have the higher values. Sponsorship would, if this screen were bigger, sponsorship would be way over there. Obviously, those tend to have very high payouts and oftentimes require less user interaction. But those like the Lady Gaga example tend to be obviously a lot more effort, a lot more cost, and a little bit less frequent. So just leave you with a few thoughts. As you're thinking about this, first and foremost, leverage the narrative of your games. Advertisers like to be in games where there's a consistent message with their product and a positive value associated with their product. Secondly, leverage all types of this advertising, the various types we saw before, sponsorships, different types of engagements, video, et cetera. Different users will want to engage with different types of advertising. And frankly, the same user may want to interact with different types of advertising depending on where they are in their day or in your game. So leverage all of those. And then lastly, be fair to your user, right? If you're going to allow an advertiser to include a 2 or a 3 minute video, make sure that the payout from that advertiser to your user is commensurate. Essentially, the right offer at the right payout will drive this virtuous cycle of increased engagement and increased monetization. Thank you very much. If there are questions, I was told to please ask you to use the microphones. I can also repeat the questions. Any questions? All right. Thank you again.